Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Hey, welcome to Cellar Door Skeptics with Tiny Rick and your co-host, Christopher Hanna, on his alternate backup hearing earbuds. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is a pleasure to come to you again. Very sorry we missed last week's episode. I just had too much going on with work and was not able to actually get to a show, unfortunately, last week due to my work content. And
well, we were doing like a back and forth thing. Like I was ready, you weren't ready. You were ready, I wasn't ready. We just couldn't get it all in one place at one time. Sometimes that happens, and I don't know. We were trying to build up an extra episode so that we would be able to handle some of those things, and that got in the way, and it was all kinds of stuff. So I don't know. It's just one of those things where if we were able to dedicate more time and our lives weren't so hectic, it would be something that we'd be able to build up some buffer to. Or if we did like what a lot of podcasts are doing these days, like they'll do like 12 episodes recorded, and then they say, there's the new season, and then they release some pre-recorded all set up with their research projects or whatever. But since we do common current event topics from time to time, it's kind of hard to do that because the show obviously has to be relatively timeless if you're doing that. So it's one of the side effects of what we've got is we kind of need to do something within the week or so of the show.
Exactly. And, it's kind of funny because tonight, here we are, we're recording and we're both a little
inebriated. You're Game of Thrones.
And I watched Game of Thrones tonight, and it was the premiere episode, and I couldn't pass up. I was like, all right, we're going to do an episode, but you're going to have to wait, Hannah, because I'm not going to, postpone my Game of Thrones viewing till then. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm so excited. We could have a Game of Thrones episode just here. I should text Jen and be like, hey, Jen, you want to come on the show? She'd be like, maybe. And I'll be like, all right, come on right now, because we're going to talk Game of Thrones. And I'm going to warn everybody, there's a possibility of having a Game of Thrones episode. And if you don't listen to or watch Game of Thrones, but you listen to our show, hey, that's fine. There's one episode you're going to want to skip. But, I'm sorry, this is like an epic adventure. And everybody wants to talk about, MASH, right? MASH was for the 70s and 80s generation. People watch that, man. That was just I remember when the last episode of MASH aired, we watched it. My parents did not let us watch any episodes of MASH until the last episode. And it was just hey, it's the last episode of MASH, you're going to watch this. Same with the Friends show. When the Friends show ended, last episode of Friends show, we watched it.
I watched the end of Seinfeld, and I was I don't know, 12, 10. I was like, what is going on? Because it was like a rehash of the whole show. All the seasons. So it's I don't know any of these in-jokes that they're telling again because they were really funny, like the soup Nazi and all that stuff.
Soup Nazi! Exactly. I don't know, man. You're right, and that's just kind of the thing here. We talk about these things and we talk about cultural references, and a lot of people are bashing Game of Thrones. They're like, oh, we're not going to listen to this, we're not going to watch this. And I was kind of the same with Breaking Bad. I'm not going to watch it.
It happens when anything gets that popular. I haven't seen either of those, Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones. I've been kind of saving them for, I don't know, like I do with Vonnegut. I only read one Vonnegut book a year so that I can still have new Vonnegut stuff in the future. I like to do that with Hitchens as well. So Game of Thrones will be this massive thing that I can one day get into in the future when nobody.
I know it'll be
help.
10 years down the road, and we'll be still doing the podcast 13 years in, and it'll be all of a sudden you're gonna go be like, hey, can we talk about Game of Thrones stuff? And I'll be like, dude, that shit ended 10 years ago, and you're like, I don't care. We're gonna have this conversation now.
I'm doing Mr. Robot right now, dude, and it's glorious.
Yeah, I love Mr. Robot. That's a great show. Great show.
So I don't know. There's just it's the way I always was with video games and stuff too. But that's why I'm not dogging on Game of Thrones because I actually do like the fantasy series. It's one of those things that was already going and moving and steamrolled ahead, and I've just found myself like I'd rather wait till this thing is completely completed so that I never have to wait because I'd just rather it be done that way. And that's the way I've always liked those shows. So I don't know. When it comes to books and stuff, same thing. It's like wait until the whole series is completed from the author, and then I'll buy a box set and save a few bucks.
Yeah. I don't know. I disagree with you. I think
I know you like that stuff.
I do.
Episodic. You like the new book fresh when it's out.
Yep. And that's the funny thing is, Game of Thrones, we could talk about all these things, and I went back and I started I'm rewatching Game of Thrones just to the point where I can hit where we're at. But it's amazing the storytelling. It's amazing how well everything comes together and how they go out of their way not to miss a point. And it is what it is. If you don't like it, hey, more power to you. But
I'm surprised they've been able to maintain the fandom that they have. It's like shows like The Walking Dead. They basically fell off a cliff. They've been just in steady decline the last couple of seasons. I don't watch Walking Dead at all.
You know why? Because it's not Game of Thrones, man.
Well, what I'm saying is that it's really hard to keep that kind of momentum. Like Game of Thrones, it's an HBO show, so that makes a big difference. But like, it's really hard to keep that kind of momentum going season in after season. Because like one of the things that like probably my favorite overall series of all time was Dexter, but there were a couple lulls in the overall arching story of Dexter that I was just like, let's go, get out of here. You know what I mean? Like, and it seems like Game of Thrones has had some spots where people are like, but really it's been this cultural momentum juggernaut just mowing down everything since it started. Reminds me a little bit of The Sopranos, how there was just nothing you could do to stop that show.
Exactly. I don't know. For me, it was fun, but it's not as fun as our first topic tonight.
Yeah, we're doing a little bit more of like kind of scammy stuff this week. I mean, some of the things that are a little bit we're skeptical of, and we were like, okay, we need to just kind of dive in and check on some of this stuff. And the one that I'm bringing in is mail and social media scams for certain. And then I see that you have a homeopathy study?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. Essentially, what the discussion I wanted to have was that think about it this way, right? As the internet evolves and as people have access to healthcare in a different means, there is a discussion and a study that kind of went around. Telemedicine is what they call it.
Okay.
And so it's kind of one of those things where I wanted to talk about this because for in my life, think about it this way. Like if your kid gets sick and you can remotely talk to a doctor without taking them to a doctor, and it costs you half or less of what it would normally cost to go to a doctor. In the world of the way our insurance works, this is more logical. My deductible is $1,500 a year, right? So if I go see a doctor, it's $350 out of pocket, right? If I take my kids, it's even more. And so, when you look at those things and you go, well, if I could remote in, and I have these high deductibles, and I got to remote in, but I can remote in, and a doctor can, prescribe to me different antibiotics, different medications, all sorts of things. Why wouldn't I do this? And I wanted to have the conversation because there's a discussion about, are we over-prescribing medications to children? And what does telemedicine actually mean to the average person?
Have
you ever done this?
Yeah, I have not done this, but I really think this is a good idea within some guidelines. So I haven't read the articles. I'm going to click on them as we get in here. Because I'm going to go for a virgin thought here is that I personally have psoriasis. I have it on my face, right on my cheeks, next to my nose, and then the crack of my nose around my nostrils. Like it literally will dry up and turn red, and it's scabby. You hear people that have psoriasis where their skin just turns into like a big red scab. I have that on my face. It happens if I don't take a shower every single day. Like if I go a day and a half, like let's say I'm like too tired and I just fall asleep on the couch or something, I just go to bed. The next morning my face will be red and itchy. Every 24 hours I have to take a shower and I have to use basically what is psoriasis shampoo on my face. And it works out fine. And if it's really bad, I can use some hydrocortisone cream and it goes away. But if I have to go to the doctor to re-up my prescription, it's $25, $50, whatever the copay is there. When in 8 seconds, I could talk on the phone and be like, I need a new one. They'd be like, okay, and push a button. You know what I mean? So telemedicine or Skype medicine, however we're getting it, be like, this is something that is not really, I guess, examination intensive. You'd be like, you've got this thing still? Yeah, I'm out of this. I'm out of my shampoo. Okay, we can take care of that. And they push a button, send it to the CVS by my house. Like it's just, there are some things that just you don't need to go to the excuse me, you don't need to go into the doctor for it. And those kinds of things, the really low intensity things that are just like, oh, whatever, like flus, antibiotics, stuff like that. I get it. It'd be really cool to be able to do that quickly, but overprescribing is a danger, and so that's something that we're going to talk about, I'm assuming. But like for me, stuff that's really benign and there's almost no chance of there being any kind of major issues. So like, let's say you got poison ivy, you need 2% hydrocortisone cream instead of the stuff they have like 0.5% at the store. 15 seconds on the phone and you're done, and maybe it's only $5 or something as a copay instead of $50. Some people that would be a big deal. So I think it's a cool idea if used properly.
Well, and I think if you look at it this way, right, like one of the big things that we have is we look at the way telemedicine works, right? And then think about it this way, if you have ADD medication, every 3 months you have to go in and you actually have to talk to a doctor. And in reality, with my wife, we pay a couple $100 every 3 months for her to go have a conversation with the doctor to get her medicine. And her situation doesn't change. Only one time in the last 20 years has her medication changed for her ADD. And so some of me looks at this and we go, if you can remotely have a conversation with somebody, this is like the capitalist and socialist ideologies combined, right? How can we provide better health care at a lower rate? Well, if a doctor can sit around and in an hour see 10 patients at 10 minutes each versus them coming into the office, it takes them driving there, it takes the doctor seeing them, all these prep work, all this information. Like, why would we not want to do that? And that's the biggest idea here, is that this could possibly be one of the best things that could happen in our society, especially if we want to move to a more socialized healthcare than what we have now. But there's so many deterrents to this. So, for example, there is an article I was reading that talks about telemedicine and how the fact that a lot of children, they're diagnosing these children under 2 over the internet. And they're prescribing them things that in the long run are not going to be beneficial for them. And so a new study basically indicates that telemedicine among children, and this has soared from 2011 to 2016, particularly for treatment of acute respiratory infections. And the problem is, this common complaint is the fact that the direct-to-consumer sector is made up of primary for-profit private companies. So it's not like these doctors are attaching themselves to, government-funded agencies. They're attaching themselves to private medicine, which is making a killing on this. And while if this was, super beneficial, right, to the industry, where children are be able to receive things at a low rate, parents aren't having to take time out of their day, all these other things are happening, all of the fact that people are making more money off of this is disgusting. And that's what bothers me, is that here we are on the edge of revolution, and all we have is people looking at it saying, how can I make more money off this? We don't care about the children. We care about what our profit ratio is. And that's the big thing here is we look at these high deductibles that we all have, and we go, how do we fix this? Telemedicine. Well, telemedicine is not fixing it. Telemedicine is sustaining the fact that we have really horrible insurance.
I think what most people have an issue with on this is the structure. So when I picture telemedicine, what I'm picturing is I'm picturing me calling into the front desk of the doctor's office and telling them I need to speak with somebody to take care of this, and they'll send me to someone in the office to take down my basic information and all of the information that is necessary for this particular situation. And like I said, I would you keep these things to a minimum of importance. So like, hey, I have this thing. This is the thing. It's a regular thing. We have it all the time. An in-person checkup is not necessary. And then they would say, okay, I will talk to the physician's assistant or the physician on duty or whoever, or your physician, whatever. And they would look at the situation and they would decide whether or not a call needed to be made to you to get more information, or if there was enough information there that they could just prescribe you the thing you've always had, or if you need something new. But in my head, I'm picturing this coming from my physician. So I call down to my doctor's office, and at some point in their system, in their schedule, in their day, your doctor or your physician assistant calls you. But what it sounds like is what these things are is this is kind of like a phone bank of people who are specifically set up under the guise of telemarketing and telemedicine, that this is just this large warehouse or office space filled with people who are taking in these calls, and this is private business, so we know this is going to be maximizing profit ratio. So like, this isn't calling into the doctor's office to deal with your medical profession. This is calling into a specialized system that is directly designed to take the pharmaceuticals from company X, funnel it through middleman B, A, and get it to the person Z. With middleman A, I would think that I think it would be the FDA would say, listen, you guys cannot be directly taking money from the pharmaceutical industry, so that we know that your care is unbiased and with the health of the patient in mind. I'm going to assume that this is not the case as far as our federal overreach is concerned, because I don't see anything in this U.S. news thing here. Private for-profit companies are essentially overly regulated to make sure that they're providing unbiased and healthy care for people. What it seems like to me, this is a pill mill.
To some extent, you're right. With that, it's a pill mill. It's whatever you want to call it. But when we look at it, we accept the reason we need this. It's all because we have really poor healthcare system. And
yeah,
I agree with you. To some extent, right? Like this is a caution.
Yeah, we both think the extreme end of telemarketing is kind of dangerous. You know what I mean? Like that's like the extreme version of it. But like the safe one is probably cool. But they may be doing a little too much antibiotics for kids.
Yes. And so, like, the recommendation is if your kid's under 2 years old, you don't use this facility. And it would be nice if we could get to the point where this replaces having to go into a hospital and all these other things, because you can kill your overhead costs. But we're not there yet. And instead of embracing it and saying, hey, we're here, we're going to do this, we're going to do all these fancy things, we should acknowledge the fact that we have limitations to where we're at. And what we want to do is create a better society than how we have it, but not to the point where you call in for your 1-year-old to get ear infection medication when you haven't been diagnosed for it. So
yeah,
I don't know.
It sounds to me like this, like the telemarketing thing. It could potentially come down to the point where, like, I saw this commercial and it said that that's the thing that would help me for the problem that I have. All right, well, we'll give you a prescription and see if you like it. Like, I don't, excuse me, I don't think it would ever get that laissez-faire. But like, I really think that there's a danger to accepting the authority of corporations in place of what we currently commonly think of as most doctors as highly qualified, highly educated, highly stressed, but very trustworthy people for making decisions for our general health. And until that changes, I mean, I really think that the idea of, corporations that are designed to make profits, those are always going to be a little suspect when it comes to taking care of people. One of the things we talk about with the government is that the government itself is very inefficient. It spends way more money than, let's say, a profitable corporation could spend doing this. But also, the government isn't designed to be profitable. The government is designed with the best interests of the people in mind. And if that costs a little bit extra, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not looking for a balanced budget or a perfect balance sheet every year. I'm looking for a quality of life increase. And if this is something that is basically streamlining pills and medication without quality checkups, this could be dangerous, especially for small children. I mean, if telemedicine, well, it doesn't surprise me entirely that from 2011 to 2016, telemedicine soared, because think about what's gone on with the internet since 2011. Like, it's been a pretty exponential growth rate there. I mean, just video conferencing calls and all that kind of stuff has gone nuts. But if that is taken away, if we still see the total amount of overall prescription usage by small infant children going up significantly, that's cause for pause for me. And so, like, I would love to see this technology help people who need it, but also I don't want to see it replace the current healthcare system, because like Mike Judge did in Idiocracy, when they go to a hospital and it's just a push button menu, you pick the thing that you need fixed, and if you accidentally click the wrong one, the robot starts to come and like cut your arm off. I don't know.
Exactly.
It's just one of those things. I really want to keep the expertise in the healthcare system, but I also want to make it streamlined and more intelligent. You know what I mean? Like, we want it all. We want the best of the best. And the telemedicine, it's something you can use, but it needs to be done with care. It's not going to be a panacea to fix all of our problems.
Exactly. So as we move on, the next discussion I wanted to have was about nutrient study, because nutrients are something that everybody wants to claim, hey, it's healthy, you need it, this is where you're going to be in the next 5 years, do this and you'll remember everything, take B2, smoke as much pot as you want, you'll be able to remember things. Yeah.
Omega-3 fatty acids or whatever.
Yeah. And there's an article from Ars Technica that talks about the nutrient industry basically being a $30 billion supplement industry. And you don't want to understand how everything works. And I thought that was a good discussion, because I'll be honest with you, it's a very hard thing to talk about nutrient, uptake. It's a very hard thing to talk about where we should be, where the supplements should be, what should we be taking. Because there isn't very hard studies that go around, hey, you should do this. My buddy's like, hey, I take a lot of vitamin D. And he's like, you smoke pot, I smoke pot. We both smoke pot. I take a lot of vitamin D. I remember things more than you do. And, the problem is there's no real studies behind it. So I have a harder time, just backing him and saying, hey, this is where we should go. This is what we should do. Because when we look at things, we go, well, what goes into an actual scientific study? And most people just don't accept it. And so I thought it would be a good discussion, because the Ars Technica article came out, and there's a discussion about the $30 billion supplement industry, and whether A, we're buying into it, B, what do the studies show, and C, if it shows negative, how can we use some of the positive things in this study to help benefit our lives? So, Hanna, do you take a lot of supplements?
No. I used to do a lot when I was doing a lot of sports and college and semi-professional baseball. Basically, I was trying to make sure that my body had everything I needed. GNC's Mega Men pill was the supplement that I used to take, and it was just 1,000% of everything. And so you would just piss neon green, because one of the things that's interesting about the human body is that once you get to a certain point of uptake, there really is no place for it to go besides out your kidneys just filter it out, and it just goes out of excuse me, out of your system. So a lot of these things here, like you give me 2, 3, 400% of something that you'll be able to use in a day, and your body just simply can't do anything with it. So it just kind of gets rid of it. So you could be overpaying if you're taking large dosages. But as far as like taking stuff like ginger root and flaxseed oil to help your appetite and make you regular or whatever. I mean, there's those kinds of things there. A lot of the research on that kind of stuff is I put it in the same area that I put a lot of the medicinal I don't know what's a nice way to say it, like psilocybin and LSD usage and stuff. Like it has research. It's not really accepted by the medical community. It's just starting finally to get funding to be researched properly, and then all of a sudden, you're getting yes or no responses. And so, like a lot of these supplement industry stuff, there are some places that are like, okay, listen, this is ridiculous. We need to test it and see if any of this stuff is real. And we're getting some pretty sufficient studies here and there, but it's not nearly enough to handle all of the snake oil that people are peddling, saying they got the new best thing on whatever TV, whatever Dr. Oz is selling at noon to your grandma. I mean, just all of that stuff is just the regulatory industry and the scientific community can't keep up with capitalism, so we're always a little bit behind on that. And I would love to see more commission study on this stuff, but with the things that we've been doing with the budget in the United States, I don't think a lot of grant money is going out compared to past years, and so the people are using that grant money on projects that are really, really necessary to the existence of the human race. So major diseases, CRISPR, and so they're not spending as much money on testing to see whether or not wild salmon oil is better than flaxseed oil.
Yeah, and see, that's the problem here is that here's the problem right here. Like they have this discussion where we talk about what you intake, what supplements you have, where you're at, how they affect you, and the big idea here is that you're going to have a better diet, you're going to exercise, and you're going to be able to eliminate some of these horrible things inside your body that you find.
Your chakras.
Supplement. Yeah, your chakras. But the problem here is that we could talk about these things, and there's not enough actual discussion around what vitamin K, for example, does for you. And it does a lot of things. But the problem is that you and me are different. I'm more active than you. You walk around a 300 square foot shop moving different parts. I could walk around a 17,000 square foot warehouse. I'm going to get more steps in. I'm going to get more exercise than you do. And then you have to take your diet into retrospect here. And that's the problem is that all these studies and all these discussions and all these supplemental findings, people are able to use the bottom level base to bring it to you. So, if a supplement works in a shit study, we'll just say, and that's what I want to call it because that's essentially what it is.
30 people in Oregon.
Yeah. They're going to say, here's your supplement. It worked. Take it. And people are going to go buy into that because of the fact that they want that. They want to be a part of this revolution. They want to be a part of all these other things. And the problem here is that it's not a good scientific study. It's just a very low rated one. And the problem becomes is that people take this as fact and they start using it, and then we have a cascading effect here, right? And if we look at the base level, if we go all the way back to where everything begins, we can understand that some of these things are good and some of them are bad. But if we don't have a good study that shows us how all these work, instead of just accepting them as fact, accepting them as where we should be, we can scrutinize them, determine what's valuable to us, and move on with our lives. And nobody does that. Nobody does those things.
I think, but the biggest issue is like determination between correlation and causation. So if you look at just the human body itself, the microbiome, our intestinal tract, the things that we have going through our gastrointestinal system, like they call it dark black matter. I can't remember exactly the terminology they use, but inside the human body is a almost infinitesimal number of bacteria, viruses, all kinds of stuff that are rolling around in your intestine, and those things are formed depending on where you are, how you eat, how active you are, the stuff that happens when you're younger. All of these things change the way that your microbiome is structured, and they're just now finding that the way your microbiome is structured will determine things that could potentially have mental health effects. I mean, when we're talking about these pills that you take and you ingest into your stomach, what's happening when it hits all that stuff? You know what I mean? Like there are so many unknown variables that are happening here that the scientific community simply cannot do small scale studies and publish in small papers in small journals and then essentially have a miracle pill that you sell on the Q home shopping network or whatever. Like that isn't something that is scientifically valid. It's a data point in a system where people are doing research about supplements. That isn't like, oh, this one journal published this saying that there's some positive side effects here. Did it say that it's guaranteed 100%? No, because nobody would do that unless they're being paid or whatever. But what it is in the end is we really need to find out what the scientific consensus is on that. And there is no consensus because, like you were saying, you don't particularly trust these tests. I don't particularly trust these tests either, because double-blind studies are something that you don't bring people in for who know what they're about to take, and also they don't know if they're getting a placebo, an active placebo, or if they're actually getting the medicine or supplement, and they're doing the testing. So like all of those things have to be completely and totally tested. And they also have to be done in a large enough scale to see where there's at. And the FDA process in the system for phase 1, 2, and 3, that is a deep long-term system. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger each time. These things don't have that. And a lot of times they don't even have FDA approval if they're safe for human consumption. And a lot of times it'll say on the bottle that this is not FDA approved. It cannot be used for basically anything. So like these are things that people need to consider when they're taking some of this stuff.
Exactly. Why don't we take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be back with more Cellular Skeptics talking about the social media scams that have bothered Hanna lately, because it's a pretty important topic. And, it's kind of funny, Hanna mentioned me. He's like, hey, we have to have this conversation. I was like, nah, we don't have to. And he's like, no, seriously, we do. So when we come back with more Cellular Skeptics, we'll be talking about social scams and if the media is trying to buy your way to happiness. We'll be back with more Cellar Door Skeptic.
Like what you're hearing? Check out more Cellar Door Skeptics every week right here on Spreaker and iTunes. Make sure you come back and check out new episodes with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna. And always, remember, prepare for the revolution.
And now, back to Cellar Door Skeptics with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Now, back to the show.
Oh, well, welcome back to another Cellar Door Skeptics.
Is that a sigh because you're tired and you want to quit, or is that
No.
just your way to start?
It's just my way to start. It's been a long week, and I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry for any of the inconvenience that we're at. But it's kind of funny because we have so much going on right now. We have so much going on, And my work is just taking up days and days and days. And I thought that it would be a good idea to have a conversation with you, right, for the show. And we're good together. I don't know. We're good together. But the funny thing is it's funny. You texted me earlier this week, and you're like, "Hey, you remember Spaceballs?" And I was like, "No, what's Spaceballs?" Yeah. And you're like, "We got to talk about Medicare for all." And I was like, "What? How does that have anything to do with our society or where we're at?" But before we can get to that, we have to talk about social media scams, because I think that's a bigger conversation, right? Because there's a lot of people that post on Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, and they're like, "Hey, give us money, do whatever we got to do. We need you to help support minorities." And a lot of people are tempted by that. They look at that and they go, "Hey, this is where we should be. This is what we should be doing. We need to use it as a way to help give money to others." And you don't want to feel like you're not tithing, right? So for example, in my world, right? I come from a very religious background. I'm used to giving 20% of my salary to the church. And so
God.
Yeah, so for something like this, for me, this is like, hey, how do you give your money back to a better organization? And it's really hard because, for example, I donate to the CFI. They get a portion of my money every month, and that's just what I do. I donated to American Atheists for a while, and I stopped doing that. I donate to Kids Baskets of West Michigan. And, I look at things and I look at where I spend my money, and I have a hard time not wanting to talk about whether some of these things are a scam.
Well, the scams that I'm talking about here particularly are Facebook, social media scams, and mail scams. So I have direct personal experience in 2 cases of this, which one of them was a big deal. One of them was really scary. The social media scam is what happens is what people do is on Facebook, you'll get a message, and it'll be a family member, and it'll be them saying, "Hey, I got this really awesome thing that I did, and I got a whole bunch of money." And you're like, "Grandpa Jones, what?" You'll be like, "Uncle Ben, what?" And so what happens is what people do is they'll look at an older person's page, they'll copy their profile photo, they'll copy all of the data that they put in the About Me section, and they'll make a new Facebook profile with that information, and they'll add you as a friend saying, "I made it a new page." And you'll say, "Yeah, sure, cool, nice to see you, Uncle Ben." And so you click yourself in there, and you're the friend now. They send you a message on the messenger, and they said, "Hey," like a week later, "Hey, I got all this money. Did you hear about this thing?" And then obviously you'll be like, "No, what are you talking about?" Still thinking this is your family member. And this is exactly what happened to my mother. Someone copied my grandfather's Facebook profile. They contacted my mom because she said, "Yes, I'll be friends with my father-in-law." And so that's not that weird. And my mom she's a boomer, and she has a little bit of a mental handicap from her bad car accident she had. So these kinds of things are kind of stressful and hard for her to understand sometimes. So this is a big deal. And so this guy's got, he's got a really good catch. As he says, I just got $180,000 grant from the government or this special project, and you don't have to pay it back. It's amazing. And this is my grandfather talking to her, she thinks. And it's no longer my grandfather. He says, "Well, my friend has all the information. I'm going to send you his profile. Click on this, and it'll take you to his profile, and you can talk to him." And she clicks on it and takes it to this guy. And this guy is now the scammer. And he's saying, "Oh, wait, yes, great. This is our system. This is all information. And, you fill out this basic information, and they'll send you a little picture, or they'll send you a list of things you need to do." Is they send us a picture of your driver's license, And, the further you get into it, like it gets scary. They start asking for really specific stuff. And so you have to, the people they're preying on are people that don't understand that this is not family. This is not friends. This is not something that's real. And by the time they realize, oh shit, I just gave a whole bunch of information to someone who is probably going to try to steal my identity, it's too late and some crap has been given up. And so now you have to make sure you contact your bank. You have to turn off talk to all the credit unions, make sure you turn off your accounts to make sure that nobody's opening new accounts and nobody's doing anything special on your credit lines. Any of that kind of identity theft stuff that everybody should do if you can, just lock your credit if you're not planning on doing stuff. And because most times they don't even charge for that anymore because of all the identity theft stuff. But anyways, this is just a Facebook Messenger thing that happened to my mother. And by the time she realized what was going on, she contacted my sister and myself. We were like, oh my God, I fill out a police report. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens here. And this is instantaneously digital. Like, I had to stop working completely. And this was my day. And my grandfather the other day got a call from a guy saying that my cousin had been in a car accident in Missouri. And it was a bad car accident. He had broken his nose in the accident. And that he needed to call, and his one call from the police station was to call Harry because my grandfather because he was in jail because he was at fault and he had killed someone. And so this guy is like, first off, this is an insane thing that's happening, and he's calling my grandfather. And they had done enough research on my grandfather's Facebook profile and his family's profile. They knew my cousin's nickname instead of his full name. And so they said that they were pretending to be my cousin using his nickname as opposed to, so like it would be like Jamie instead of James or something, or like Bob instead of Robert or Dick instead of Richard, so using that. And they called in and saying that he broke his nose, so they would muffle their nose and talk. And so my grandfather's talking to his lawyer. He's talking to everybody. He's trying to figure out what's going on. And eventually it's figured out that this is all a scam. But like, money was queued up. Western Union was on this my grandfather's 75, 78. Like, this is a serious thing that's happening. And this is the other thing. One last thing is I got an email from the Florida Department of Transportation. Or no, not email, letter mail. And in this, it says that my father had driven over a toll in Florida with his license plate Bob, because my dad is Uncle Bob now, because his father, my grandmother's brother passed away, and he was the old Uncle Bob, and now my dad is the new Uncle Bob. Anyways, my dad he got his car in the estate, and he has the Bob license plate. It's just a family thing that we've always done. But they sent a picture saying that you owe $1.34 for the Florida Department of Transportation, Sun Pass, whatever. And it's a picture of an Acura with Bob digitally entered into the license plate, like when you drive through a stoplight. And so $1.34, people are like, crap. There's just a chance that I was in Florida. I drove through. This picture is murky and terrible. I can't quite tell what it is. So you send in $1.34, and let's say they send that email or that letter out to 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people, and let's say 10% of those people. So 500,000 people, 500,000 people, 10% of those people send in $1.34. You just made $50,000 for sending out letters. Like, these things are happening all over the place, and they're happening everywhere. So my family got hit twice on the digital end and once on the mailing end, and like, it's everywhere. And it's like the whole concept of our show, Cellar Door Skeptics. It's like, you have to be, I have it in my hand right now. This Florida Department of Transportation thing, they even have one of those shiny things, like how to read your invoice, your toll invoice, and it's shiny paper. It looks just like something you would get from, I don't know, Consumers Energy when they're adding stuff to the papers. Like, it's insane how complicated this is. Like, Chris, have you ever had to deal with any kind of like scam stuff? Have you been hit with any of that where people are trying to like pull off something on your family? Because at this point, people, you really need to tell your family to be skeptical and not trust anything unless you can verify that it's real.
Yeah, we get that every once in a while, honestly. Like, I'll get people that message me that want to include me in a group, and you're like, I don't know you, I shouldn't do this, but yeah, we get scams every once in a while. One of the big ones is that my daughter, was online, and they're like, hey, you can come online and be part of this community, and she's like, what's this, Dad? And I'm like, don't be a part of that community. They're just trying to take your identity, but still, there's some of that there. And I don't know, we could talk about, where they're at versus where we're at. And my daughters like a lot of YouTube, in fairness, but they also understand the harms that can come along with each one of these different programs. And
well, I think the young kids have a pretty good idea of what's going on. Like, I think teachers and people in school and young people know about scams. So, like, all of these cases that I just talked about, those are elderly people in my family. And they said that something like 70% of the fake news that was shared in the last cycle was in, like, the boomer generation and getting up into that general area. So, like, I mean, that's one of the things here is, like, this is a little bit of a tangent, but like the way the brain develops when you're young and grow up with electronics versus the way you're older, never having experiences, it's harder for you to kind of get into that mode of talking and thinking. And I think that's part of the problem, is that what we have here is that people have basically monetized and weaponized the ignorance of the internet and the intellectual system that is the digital economy. That this kind of thing is happening. So like your daughter is kind of like, she knows enough to be like, what the hell is this? Well, like maybe grandma would be like, oh, these people want to talk to me. Click, click. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference there. So I think that we have to be hyper vigilant with our kids, but I think we have to be overly hyper vigilant with the adults or the elderly, because if you think about it, if someone's trying to steal identities and scam people, they're not going for kids because kids don't have any wealth amassed. They're not retired. They don't have a pot of money that they're trying to survive on. So there's nothing to steal from them. There's a very easy case. The elderly have money and they're not very, I guess, resilient on the internet. This is a honeypot, and they're slamming it on. Public Service Clearinghouse started it, and the internet trolls will finish it.
Well, as we wrap up the episode, it's kind of funny because there's a lot of scams on the internet. There's a lot of people trying to take your money. There's a lot of people doing all these different things. And our goal is for you to not get scammed. If you're going to throw money in the garbage, at least throw it at Seller or Skeptics at Patreon.com.
I would hope that people would be a little bit more proactive with their money if they're going to give it to us. But yeah, no, it's a real threat. I mean, it really is a thing that they can disappear. Like, if you look online, just in your local news, anyone that's listening to the show, go to your local news and just look up scam, and you'll see elderly woman, elderly man, elderly couple, scam, 15, 20, 25, 30, 55, 75, $100,000. Like, you will see the depletion of people who are I really will say they're at risk people. They are at risk, and in this world, that these are, this is people who have a resource that needs to be protected. And I really think there's a limit to the freedom that capitalism demands when it comes to the market will take care of everyone. You and I, Chris, we obviously don't agree with that, and that capitalism can prey on the poor, the weak, the people that are easily scammed. And so this is a direct case of that. So all of these things that we've talked about here, these are all things that capitalism openly concedes its support for, because in a normal capitalist market, all of these kinds of things where you just look for someone who's silly enough to get stuck in your scam, that's capitalism. Creating a demand for something and swindling people out of that stuff, that's just dog eat dog, wolf eat puppy. Like that is the world. And so the more people that know, the better. And I mean, I really didn't think it was as big of a deal as it was in the last couple of months. I keep seeing this stuff happen with my family and friends over and over and over. I thought it would be a cool topic for us to cover.
Exactly. Well, as we close, we have to look at what are our quick saves for the week. And it's kind of funny because the one I found, and we can talk about yours in a minute, Hannah.
Yeah, yours is cool as hell. I gotta say.
It could almost be its own segment on its own. But essentially, as I was going through Reddit this week, I found, why do birds' eyes change color? And in fairness, there are some species, hawks, gulls, different avian birds, that mark the difference between where they're at and adulthood. And it's kind of funny because like, it's weird. You know, like, we talk about these things, we talk about what we like, and some birds actually change eye color based upon where they're at socially, maturity-wise,
that's
for
crazy.
everything they do. Isn't that crazy? That's
Yes.
insane to me.
And that would be like my daughter starting with blue eyes, and then once they're married and have to have babies and have babies screaming and yelling at them, their eyes just turn black, and they're just like, "Yes, this is the end." Like that would that's that. You
Game
know what I
of
mean?
Thrones.
Like, yeah, I know. It's just like what, like, you think about it, like eye color changing. That's pretty wild.
Exactly, and not all birds' eye colors change. In fairness, not all of them do. But I just thought it was a cool conversation for where we're at, right? You know, like, why are birds' eyes color changing? Because a lot of people don't understand, you know, that there are differences between what we're looking at. And you know what spawned this whole thing was a Netflix documentary called Birds of Paradise. Yeah, seriously. Netflix had this documentary, and I've been watching a lot of them because I like to smoke pot, you know, but I've been watching a lot of documentaries that are talking about different, you know, things inside of our society, different things inside of our environment, and this is one of them. They were talking about birds whose eyes color change based on where they call home, what the jungles are, is there deep seas by them, blah, 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 right? And that's the idea here is, like, I just couldn't pass it up because it's insane to think, you know, birds' eyes could change color, but they really do.
Well, I can think of it being a relatively easy explanation for evolution. If you think about it, if you're looking for an indicator as simple as puberty, right? Like, so like, imagine if humans were, let's say, a weird shade of green until they hit puberty. And then after that point, we all turn to our white, our brown, our darker brown, our, you know, whatever colors that we have throughout the entirety of the human species. Well, if you have all of those, you know, but like, let's say up until, you know, 16, 17, 18 for men or for girls, and, you know, 19, 20, 21 for males, the end of their prepubescent areas, that would be, you know, a skin tone change or whatever. Like, that could be something that would be similar to this. So like, if in evolution, if you have a female or a male like doing their mating rituals, and they see that your skin tone is the wrong color, they're not going to spend energy and time investing in your attention. You know, in the state of nature, you're going to be trying to maximize your output. And so, like, let's say eyes, like, apparently, you know, these birds will look at each other longingly in each other's eyes and see it's the wrong color and be like, I gotta go. Bye, Felicia. Like, I guess that's something that, like, it has to have a, you know, an evolutionary reason. Like, there has to be something that we're like, wrong color, gotta go.
Exactly. So, what's your quick save of the week?
Mine is it's not that unpredictable because I'm still, to this point, I am still a Bernie Sanders follower, and what he has done, it's been a big thing for me, is he put this out a few times, the Bernie Sanders Medicare for All bill, but this is the most recent, the most up to date, the most, you know, presidential ready bill. And this one is it's at Vox.com. You can read the entire thing. I tried to read the intro, the abstract, you know, what's going on. I'm waiting for a bunch of really smart people who can handle legalese to tell me what the hell this thing says. But the abstract itself is relatively understandable, and essentially it's basically guaranteeing healthcare as to all people as a basic human right, and that all institutions that provide healthcare will be able to participate in the Medicare for All plan, provided you meet regulations and restrictions that are necessary. So essentially the fact that you prove that you are not discriminating based on age, sex, gender, all of the kinds of things that we have when it comes to the Bill of Rights in in the United States, and probably also something a little bit more specific, but I'm not a healthcare expert, so I wouldn't know what some of the requirements are they have on that. But essentially all healthcare insurance companies that provide basic general healthcare insurance would be negated. They would be instantaneously irrelevant and unnecessary. Now, any kind of cases where you would be dealing with something, so like let's say you had cosmetic insurance or something like that, you could do that, and that would cover, if you want to do any kind of augmentations or whatever, that would be covered under private stuff. So private insurance, private medicine would be excluded in the Medicare for All thing, but personal health, personal well-being, necessary health would be covered completely and totally under Medicare for All for basically your tax bill. And it's been proven in last year's tax analysis that the total cost and your increase in taxes would be less than what you pay on average in premiums. So this is the word for word. This is him putting his stuff out there. You can check it out. You can look for on the analysis. I would assume that you probably need to go to an independent medicine or at least a medical expert analysis, because let's face it, Fox News and CNN are having completely different responses to his word for word bill here. But this is actually what his plan is. And so Elizabeth Warren also has plans similar to this at her page. And so pretty much I love the candidates who put out everything. They give it all. So like the guys like Mayor Pete and Booker and Harris and some of them, like they love to talk the game, but they don't have any of the actual bills out, so we can look at exactly what they want to do. And Bernie Sanders is putting it all out there. This is exactly what he wants to do, and hopefully he gets a chance to put that towards legislation. So we'll see what happens, but this is my say for the week. Spaceballs, the Medicare for All.
Spaceballs, the Medicare for All. Thank you so much for joining us for another Cellar Door Skeptics. We had an amazing time tonight.
Yeah.
A little bit shorter than usual, but hey, we got to do something right.
We got to blame Game of Thrones. Blame the Game of Thrones. Someone died. Who died?
Someone died.
Who died?
No one died.
No one died on the.
No one died.
That's insane. It's like counterintuitive to the whole point of the show.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll be back next week with another amazing episode of Cellar Door Skeptic. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker. CellarDoorSkeptics.com.
If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today, because we bring the discussion with the sources.